So one of the things that's been kind of going through the news lately is people have been, for some reason, giving a hard time to this author. And I read the article, so I'm going to go through the details if I can remember them. But he was a fan fiction author. I don't remember his name. I know he's in California. And he wrote a book called The Fellowship of the King, I believe is what he called it.
Okay.
I don't know. So apparently, like, it very closely resembles the Rings of Power, which is a Amazon series, which you said you watched an episode and it was horrible.
Oh my gosh. The prequel to Lord of the Rings, for those of you who don't know, but I feel like you have to be living under a rock to not know about this prequel thing. But yes, it's awful. I watched one episode. Right. I want to say that I got halfway through the second episode and I was like, I can't.
I mean, it was well noted online before it ever came out that it was leftist toxic garbage.
Sure.
So as soon as I heard that, I'm like, I don't need to see it. Like, I don't like
no further information.
Yeah, no further information needed.
Sure.
Because, like we've talked about before, like they can't push agenda pieces in new material because no one will watch it.
Right.
You have to shoehorn it into things that people want to see by running them.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, right. Just take good things and try to put in the social justice thing, and inevitably it just
turns to crap.
It just turns to crap.
But so like I know that we both have issues with like completionism. So it's like I followed this thing. I want to see all of the iterations of it, and then like that just comes and bites you in the ass in the modern day.
Well, not just that. Like it's not just that I didn't like the new Rings of Power. What ends up happening is, so like we have daughter, right, and she wants to read, The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, which is perfect for her age bracket. Sure. It's the same thing that I read when I was her age, but now I'm so mad about this Lord of the Rings prequel that I can't even enjoy my original content that's unaltered and fine. There's perfect
70 years ago.
Yeah, like it's written fantastically.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing. Like, I feel like when you get in, this is going to be part of it, but like, to my understanding, during his lifetime, J.R.R. Tolkien only published The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and that he wrote a lot of backstory content, but it was really supposed to be so that he had a firm grasp of the world for those 4 books.
Sure, it was editorial notes. I don't think it was ever meant to be published.
Sure. And my understanding is, and again, like I'm not a super fan by any stretch of the imagination. I read the book once in grade school and once again in high school.
Sure.
Because the movies had come out and I reread
the
original trilogy. So like I've read both The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings twice and that's it. I'm aware of there being other books that have come out. I've known super fans. I'm not one of them. I never read the appendices on the back.
Oh gosh.
But I'm saying like I know that there are super fans and I'm not trying to like, get into a war where like I miss a detail and I know that like it's a very oriented thing. But his children eventually inherit the, wealth of his writings, and they published like Silmarillion, which I know like has all of the. It's almost like I've heard it described as like the Bible that describes like the past events of people, but it's very like you get a chapter about like a 20-year period, that sort of thing.
Right. Well, really, what it is, it goes into detail about the backstory, but again, these are really meant as author notes.
Right.
So there's a lot of speculation about like dates and things that are not completely.
Sure.
Like I hate to use the word factual because it's fictitious.
Right.
But like things that don't completely line up. Well, it was never meant to be a completely lined up history because again, this was just for the author so that they knew the world that they were creating. Fudging fudging a 5 or 10 year fictitious war. It's not
getting the exact dates of the battle. It's not class. Got it. So anyways, this guy, I don't remember his name, from California, he wrote fan fiction and about the appendices and what he thought happened during these appendices, like these appendices periods, which I don't even understand. So anyways, like he copyrighted it in like 2015 or 17, I'm not sure on dates, and he had it published through Amazon, of all things. And apparently he has notes of contacting and being in talks with the Tolkien estate and hand-delivering them a copy that was signed for.
Okay, so like a certified mail.
Right.
Okay.
So, like, we know for, according to him, I don't want to say as fact, because I'm not trying to be a legal person, but according to his complaint.
Sure.
He can prove that he handed off a copy to the Tolkien estate, that they at least acknowledged that they had received said copy. So now he's suing them because apparently he also was a horrible writer and created the Rings of Power. Like, I don't know why I'd be embarrassed to take credit for that, but whatever. Like, maybe his version wasn't as atrociously SJW. Who knows? Whatever. So anyways, he's suing Amazon and the Tolkien estate for, I want to say, $450 million.
I mean, I honestly think he has a case. I mean, if this isn't something that is so obscure, it lives in grandma's basement in, you know, some rural county. I mean, realistically, if he can prove that he has the material, that he copyrighted it, which, I mean, if you published it, this information was made available to the public at large.
Sure.
Right? So, I mean, I don't see them... honestly, what I do, like, if I were to call it, like, if I were to make my bet, call it today, I would call that they're going to settle out of court. Like, why risk taking this to court and having him, you know, take over the whole thing? I would totally see this as they settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. That's my call.
I mean, sure. I think that's possible. I don't know, though, because here's the thing. Like, if you write a book and, you know, it's still on whatever for this huge, you know, I think it's over $1 billion that Amazon has spent on special effects. It's the most expensive series ever made, you know.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
That's heartbreaking.
It is.
It's really horrible.
Yeah. Regardless of content, though, like, here's the thing. If you settle out of court, you basically would have to relinquish all of these characters. They're going to make future seasons and whatever. They have, in previous cases where they've proven copyright malfeasance, where, like, they've stolen someone's copyright, the copyright holder has been able to take all profits.
Really?
Yes. So here's a weird one.
So a good lawyer might advise him, this is your potential.
Right.
So go for broke.
So, but here's the weird part of this. This is not being sold as an individual entity. In other words, like, in the past when this has happened, you have, like, box office. And, like, you can actually trace, you know, if you were to say a movie that came out in the 80s, right? I can look at how much money it made at the box office, how much money the studios made, how much money that the studio made from that property on, you know, home movie, VHS, DVD, whatever, you know, how much they licensed it to for streaming services. Because Amazon owns the property and is streaming it on their own platform, it becomes hard to say how many of the people who bought Amazon Prime to get into Amazon Prime Video did so for this, because it doesn't have an individual whatever. So, could the argument be that since this was the flagship of Amazon, and it has been, I mean, even Amazon, I think, in their promotion, has advertised this is our flagship thing, blah, blah, blah. Could you potentially get a high percentage of all Amazon Prime
of the platform users?
Right, like let's say hypothetically that if you're going to say this is the number one thing, and you're able to get the notes to say, you know, 2 billion people watched it. So I'm going to say that that's 20% of all of the watch content on Amazon Prime. So therefore, I should get 20% of all of the subscriptions, all of the payments.
I mean, if you're a real stats guy. And you know, lawyers would hire whatever experts, but if you're a real stats guy, I mean, realistically, if it were me, I'd go in and say, okay, how many users after the show was you know, published, or after the show was put on your platform, how many users signed up, new users, and then immediately watched the show? Because if the new user immediately watched the show and they didn't watch anything else,
well, the other problem is, I think that's weird too, because how many people would have, because you can also make an argument in court of like, well, if they hadn't made the show, people would have dropped out or whatever. The people
sure, I mean, people stayed.
I mean, the thing with streaming is it's so hard to say.
Yeah, what they came for, what they stayed for, right, what they're gonna watch in the future. Sure.
Yeah, I also think Amazon's really weird because they do yearly subscriptions rather than monthly.
True, they do, because I had the Amazon subscription way before they had the platform, like the watch whatever Amazon Prime Video. But I watched Upload, which is a Prime exclusive show, like it's a whatever you call it, an original.
Sure.
But to be honest, other than very sporadic movies, I really have only watched Upload. So I watched Upload through its entirety, and I want to say they came out with the second season, which I watched. And then I watched the first 2 episodes, or 1.5, of this Lord of the Rings prequel, and that's really it.
I mean, I've seen a few shows on there, and I actually, I feel like it's such a mixed bag with Amazon. It's
very random what you'll find on.
Right, because I used to love the show Botch, but then it got politically lefty, and then it kind of went to hell. I've heard really good things about the Jack Reacher show, as well as there's a Tom Clancy show on there I heard was not bad, though I haven't seen it. I also want to say that the Clarice spinoff of Silence of the Lambs is the worst trash garbage I've ever seen. I
mean, I just don't understand why we're doing prequels and requels and just make your own new stuff. I totally get that fan fiction is a thing, and being really involved in a particular storyline is a thing. I mean, I myself, I think I told you earlier, I'm 23 books into a series by a single author, right? So, I mean, I have a following. At this point, really, her books are trash. I hate buying them, but I'm 23 books in. I can't not continue to continue.
Sure.
But, just make your own new content. Stop messing with the old stuff and just make a new thing.
Right, because they're kind of running. Her politics changed, her writing style has changed, but she's still trying to tack it on to...
Yeah, so originally she was very, very conservative, and I don't mean that I don't want to read liberal stuff. I just mean at the beginning she was very conservative, but it was also a very kind of PI noir book, very much police work, very much private investigator, and it had fantasy elements included. So, for example, vampires or what have you. And now it's mostly about polyamory, which that's not at all where the book series started. And so now it's just I really honestly feel like it should be shelved in the erotica section.
Sure. I mean, I feel like you're getting a little bit off topic here, because to me, one thing, I understand that fan fiction is weird, because to my understanding, right? I write a book and I have characters in it. Right. I understand that my understanding of fan fiction is that there's parts of the internet that will take. I mean, typically what happens in fan fiction, my understanding is that it's a lot of erotica. You have characters that are smoldering, and everyone kind of.
Yeah, well, it's every permutation of character sleeping together, but also development you could possibly have. I mean, just any friend group, any sleeping together group, any whatever, it's done in fan fiction.
Right, but my understanding, at least how it used to be, I feel like I don't keep up with the internet, which needs to be its own probably video, but
sure.
Is it was more like Reddit. People would post these things to a forum, but there was no idea of rights or what have you for that, because it wasn't your characters. You didn't have the copyright to the original property. So I feel if you were going to because here's the thing, when we talk about things I don't know, Dracula comes to mind, or Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes is the most adapted character in the history of ever. Right. Because it's old, but it's also kind of timeless, and the idea of a detective story. Yeah. And I feel that gaslight time of London is just very very visual. So it's been adapted the most times of any work ever. Plus, it's also its copyright. So I can right now steal a work completely or write a new one, and no one can stop me.
Correct. Well, fan fiction used to be, like you said, very forum based, where you would have one, let's say, creator, right? start a prompt, and then they would just leave it as the end of a chapter. And it was really open-ended because any other creator could then tack on another chapter. And so you might have, 50 pages of fan fiction written by 20 different creators.
Sure.
And nobody claimed ownership because it was a collaborative work.
Sure, but like that's my point, is once you get into... Because like I know that 50 Shades started as a Twilight fan fiction, and then they basically just changed the character names to make it...
Really?
Yes.
Well, that makes sense.
So like that doesn't bother me so much. They're just talking about archetypal characters.
Right.
So like taking a dynamic of characters over, because like most people don't know this, but like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are based on the Four Storms, which is like a Greek.
Right.
So like you're just basically, there's only so many archetypes of characters that you can really get into in the history of ever. So like making a new character that is an archetype that's thousands of years old and kind of embedded into human psychology totally makes sense.
Right.
And you can't really copyright that. But like if I write a story and I have very specific names, like Lord of the Rings does.
Right. I mean, down to spellings
and whatever.
Languages.
I don't understand, one, how the guy wrote a fan fiction with characters from the Silmarillion or, the appendices or whatever that's based on J.R.R. Tolkien's work and is able to copyright those things. I
see. Okay. So you're saying because he didn't own the intellectual property to begin with, he doesn't have a leg to stand on afterward.
Right, like he can create scenarios of like, because here's the thing, like my understanding of Silmarillion is like you'll get like, a 1,000-year period and it'll have a chapter of like 20 pages.
Right.
So that's obviously not enough to create a season of television.
Right.
And I think in this case they're going to do like 5 seasons of television based on that 20 pages, which again, very minuscule amount, but it's also very dense.
Sure.
Telling, so that needs to be kind of broadened out, and that at least from his projection or his version of things, again, like I haven't read his book, I haven't read the Silmarillion, and I haven't seen the show, so this is very speculative on my part, but like, assuming that like they took wholesale his work, I mean, sure, like you're getting into the details of his work, but at the same time, those characters that he was writing about was not...
they weren't his to begin with.
Right.
Sure. I mean, I could see that. I mean, if he developed new characters and new names and then put them in that world...
But he doesn't know the world either. Because that's like... I understand that from his perspective, Tolkien's, that like Middle Earth became the Earth of today, but it's still Middle Earth is its very specific...
Right. Well, if you say Middle Earth to, I would hope, just about anybody, they would immediately know that you're not talking about reality. I mean, it's kind of, I feel like it's kind of like that Wakanda Forever. You should know
Wakanda is Marvel and it's...
it's not an actual real... place. Like, I feel like that should also stand for Middle Earth. You should know this is a reference to a fictional world.
Right. I mean, it's just like there's... I mean, we're getting into the part now where because we all, the new ideas, new IPs are not being developed at all, and everything is being brought back to things that are very old and very,
and trying to rework them.
The point is this, is it's like, because fan fiction exists, like let's take Star Wars because I know that they have like the most rabid fan base.
Right.
Every possible story that I imagine could ever exist in Star Wars has already been written by fans. Like they're I don't read any fan fiction. I never have, but I'm willing to bet that if you were to give me carte blanche, I'm going to do Episode 7 as a direct sequel to Return of the Jedi. There is no story that I could write as a writer, given that property, that it does not already exist on the internet.
And this is without even peeking.
Right, this is without peeking. Like, this is just me, any story I can think of. Like, you've been given Return of the Jedi. There are probably a million, variations on the internet. And I mean, I think I'm a creative person, but just saying, like, if I were to write that from scratch, not looking, not trying to... I've never read any of the expanded universe crap, none of it. I'm willing to bet I will somehow
Well, and not just stumble on one story, but stumble on like half a dozen stories.
Right.
Because like you think you're being very creative by starting over in left field,
right.
and you might stumble on one story, and then you're like, well, let me get a little more traditional, and then you stumble on another.
Right. Like,
so now you've stepped into 6 different...
combined like 10 fan fiction stories, and maybe even like one of the like canon stories.
Sure.
And because there's only so many things that like Luke Skywalker can do after that. There's only so many things that somebody else can do after that. So it's like, if I'm telling a story that, like, let's just say, let's say Avatar, because it's fairly new.
Right.
It's not an old story, but like everybody kind of recognizes it now. It has a pretty big fan base. It has, fan fiction being written out there. So, like, let's say I'm in the middle of writing my story arc of, like, let's say 4 or 5 parts. So I'm on part 2 right now.
Right.
And then there's people copywriting ahead of me, and, like, eventually one of them is right.
Oh, of course.
And like,
how do you prove? Yeah, because then you have to go back and say, well, I read it or I wrote it before they wrote it, but I didn't publish mine because I wanted to keep it a secret.
Right.
Because we were going to put it on television.
Or like I'd already planned it out, but it was just notes. Like I hadn't fleshed it out, but somebody actually wrote it out and published it, even though I didn't publish my notes.
Right.
So therefore, their copyright is before mine, even though I planned it that way. Forever. Like.
Well, that's the same problem that J.R.R. not J.R.R. Martin, J.K. Rowling. That's the same problem that she had, which is that she had to outright tell her publishers, "I've written the last chapter of Harry Potter. It's in a safety deposit box. It is an actual completed thought and what have you, but it can't be published. It's dated." But it's a work that exists for that reason, because how do you say that you finished your story? You finished your story in an original way and didn't steal an ending from fan fiction.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I know with J.R.R. Martin for the Game of Thrones books, the Song of Ice and Fire books, he has said that, like, people, will write their ending, what they think will happen all the time. Right. He said one of them was correct. That he actually pointed. He didn't say which one, but he's like, I read this forum where they do the thing, and one of them finally got it right. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, like, that's fine. Like, I understand
you can only have, again, so many permutations of a story.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, especially when you've written so much into it.
Right.
But, like, it now makes me wonder, does that person potentially have rights with this?
I mean, that's kind of like sticking your hand in a top hat and pulling out the winning lottery number. Like, you don't know, they don't know, nobody knows. I mean, maybe the author would have thought about it. Again, like, going back to my favorite author who's 23 books in, she has outright told her fans, I love to love you, but don't send me fan fiction, because should I, for any reason, read it or stumble across something and I happen to use it, you're putting me in a huge liability situation, because you can come back to me and say that I stole your work.
Right.
So, like, again, love to love you, don't send me your fan fiction.
I mean, but that's another part of that, right? Like, so if you are, like, a struggling person, right?
Sure.
Because it's almost like I remember they started doing this, like, when Walmart started, like, trying to expand internationally.
Right.
You would get people who would, like, buy Walmart.com UK or Walmart.com Japan, and then, like, make people pay out the ass for Walmart when they eventually got to these countries to, like, get the, to get the website. Like, I'm almost wondering, like, if this case goes through, do people start paying to copyright their work ahead of time to really write companies into corners? Because, like you said, there's only so many permutations of what can happen. Even if it's poorly written, your story. But
it doesn't matter. I mean, because then you get into, well, it's my idea, which is a very this generation thing. Well, it was my idea, I had it first. Yes, I understand it was your idea and you had it first, but did you do anything with your idea? Did you send it to an editor? Well, sure, but if you publish it on the internet, so, like, this guy actually published it as a book and made it available to the world at large. But let's say it stayed on, Reddit, whatever subgroup.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Does this incentivize people to take their stupid Reddit outlines.
Right.
Publish them as a one-page thing on Amazon because Amazon does not have publishing criteria to self-publish. Right. So you publish it, and you send a copy to the Library of Congress. You get it copyrighted. You spend like the $40-$50,
sure.
And then and maybe you do that 100 different permutations. You figure like whatever series is out there.
Yeah.
You figure like there's a series that's really popular. So like there's only so many ways they can go. If I can copyright it before they get there.
Like, I mean, it's a slippery slope.
Is that fair though?
I don't think so. I really don't. Well, here's the thing: is once you get into litigation, once a precedent has been set. I mean, that's when people really have to start getting scared. Because so let's say that this guy wins, what kind of precedent is it setting? Because if it's setting that precedent where I can go in and just spend, let's say, a month, right? I'm on summer vacation, I don't have anything to do, so I spend a month just thinking of random endings to things, and I spend a whole summer publishing all this stuff.
Right.
I mean, maybe one of them hits, and now the precedent is set where I can profit $1 million. Yeah. I mean, this is like life-changing money.
Right.
This isn't, I can buy a truck.
Right.
Like, I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. And I've also heard things where authors have said like they run through fan fiction and they've gotten ideas, and I feel like that you can't say that anymore.
Yeah, no. I mean, well, that was even a bad thing. Saying it before was kind of cheating,
right?
But saying it now is pay my money, which pay me my money. Like, what am I going to get out of this? Right,
but like again, like I feel like if I write a book or I write a movie, I own what I wrote.
Sure.
And I don't think, like, just me personally speaking, as someone who writes and as a storyteller,
sure.
If you or anybody else takes my idea and does whatever with it, I should sue you immediately. I should get like a cease and desist. And if I go that direction, I feel like it's your fault for putting my, it's my character's name, but it's my name because I.
Sure. Well, again, but this is going back to original content, like you writing original stories in real, like in the current world or a fictional world. That's original content. Reworking something that already exists, did it even ever belong to you to begin with?
Well, I mean, of course, like when you talk about, like, say, Superman or Batman and how, like, you look at, like, some of the, like, how they stole those properties from their original creators through the companies, and, like, now you have a company that stole it from somebody else, so, like, somebody stealing from them is,
right.
A little morally gray to me, but however, like, there was at least some compensation to the Batman and Superman creators, however minuscule it may have been.
Sure.
But there's at least an idea that there's ownership between, these things. My point is like, the difference between a major IP, like, let's say Marvel or DC or one of those, and what I write is obviously popularity. Like,
sure.
I mean, I guess I could write something that big, but chances are I will never,
try to
surpass Superman or Batman in the global, understanding of an IP. So, like, I think that, like, people, especially the kinds of things I write, Marvel, DC, fan fiction is probably going to have a much larger audience than I would ever have. But I don't fundamentally see a difference, because if I write a character and they write a character, they're still characters, they're still stories, stories still have certain things, and if people, steal from that, to me, that's mine. Like, you basically stole my name. You stole it. I don't care what you did with it. And then you writing different permutations of my story to box me in to say you now own ownership of where I can go in my story, that's a little funky to me.
Yeah, I mean, if you really want to get litigious about it, I mean, malfeasance, like, you maliciously, you did this with intent. You did this with the intent to steal not only my characters, my world, but also my profit.
Sure,
I can see that.
Yes.
Yeah, so TikTok, I feel like everybody on the face of the planet, if you have a cell phone, you watch TikTok.
I do not.
Lies. You were on TikTok last night.
I was on Instagram.
Oh, gosh. I mean, short form videos, I feel like TikTok's, TikTok has made just the short form video, I mean, micro 1 minute videos, the thing to be. So what, it's TikToks on TikTok, I think Reels on YouTube,
Shorts
and Shorts on Instagram.
I think Reels and Shorts got mixed up. There's also one on Facebook now.
Yeah.
Which I don't know what they're called.
I don't know, but I feel like unanimously though, they're all pretty much called TikToks, at least colloquially.
Right.
Sure. So, which is a huge thing in that people know that China is gathering all sorts of information.
Right. Like, it's not just like whatever. Like, they basically, by signing up for TikTok, you grant them access to all of your phone's data, to include to listen to everything that you say.
Right.
And like also to keep your camera going and like video everything.
Sure.
There's all sorts of just shadiness. But that being said, if you ever look at like the big tech giants, like they always have tape over their like lens on their phone and their computer at all times. Like,
or what's always really funny to me is like Steve Jobs saying like he didn't want his kids on iPhones and iPads and whatnot, or even like Tim Cook, saying, oh, we need to limit screen time for minors. Like, this is something that's not allowed in my household, whatever. Like, that to me is hilarious. So TikTok, it makes sense to me that the 27 states in the U.S. have banned it on government devices.
Sure.
And that makes sense for a multitude of reasons. One, it's a government device.
Sure.
And the government...
You're doing government-y things if you're on a government device.
And it's owned by the government. They gave it to you.
Right.
Yeah. So that makes sense. Like, if they're going to regulate their own devices...
Sure.
Totally makes sense. But then there's Utah, where Utah has banned TikTok for minors and classifying that as persons under 18.
Sure.
So that's one precedent, right? Being able to ban an app for minors. I don't think that had been done before, but now there's Montana wanting to ban it on all personal devices, regardless of age.
Sure.
So that's a whole separate precedent of them banning an entire app.
Sure.
Under the premise of public safety.
Well, I know for me, there were times I've wanted to put bets out.
Sure.
On things, or there's been like a promotion on a betting app where you get like $100 free to bet of the access money. And I'm like, why not? Like, like I'm only going to bet that $100, but like, if it's a free $100 and they're willing to do it, I'm willing to be disciplined enough to not do $101.
Right.
So, which is what they're betting against, obviously, by giving you the first 100.
Sure.
But, like if I think I've got a good call or whatever, whatever. But the point is like Idaho does not have legal online gambling in their state. So if you can't download the app there, and if you have the app downloaded from being in another state, it will not take your bet or your money or allow you to like interact with it.
Based on location services? Yes. Okay. So that's another thing that should actually kind of get talked into this is you currently have the ability to turn your location services off.
Correct.
But there is also legislative talks of making that not feasible anymore, of always having your location services on.
With some apps, and betting service being one of them, because there's so many states where it's illegal, you cannot use the app while not having access to location services. And I can also tell you that there are some apps that you are not allowed to access if you're using a VPN.
Sure, which again is a whole other thing.
Right.
Because now they're saying, that VPNs should be illegal because you can mask your location. So a friend of mine lived in China for almost a decade, and that was a huge thing where he had lifetime subscriptions to 20 different VPNs because China would crack down on one VPN and he would have to download another one, and like he couldn't get media, like things were obviously very different, and him even just trying to communicate with his family, not doing anything untoward, but just wanting to watch like Netflix or wanting to talk to his family in the States, and he would have to go through a VPN.
Right, and I know that like with Netflix, the way that works is when you're buying the distribution for any film or any media, you only buy it per country. So like there's an issue of like in different countries you can have access to different movies, different whatever.
Sure.
Like I know that not all of the streaming services are available in all countries. So, like,
right.
I know when I was in South America, Hulu wasn't always a thing in that country. So you'd have Hulu original series that they would loan out to Netflix or to Amazon or whatever.
That makes sense.
Because it's like they own the property.
Right, and how else do you reach an audience if you're not allowed in that country?
Right, or you're just not, you're not finding it financially feasible to, market and whatever. It's a poor country. They're not going to have, 20 different streaming, subscriptions in a home.
Right.
So, you might as well make something by, giving out your original series to the competition in that country.
Right.
So my point is that I know a lot of people would use VPN to get around that, so they would then, if hypothetically Hulu has put the show you want on Netflix and you have a Netflix subscription and you can change your location to South America, you could watch that show for free by just changing your VPN.
Right.
Or, hypothetically, like, I know that the costs of these subscription services differ based upon country of origin. So, if you wanted to get Netflix for cheaper, you could order it masking your location to somewhere else.
I mean, that to me, the VPN thing, I mean, I get using a VPN to mask your location because you don't want to give away your information for free. I feel like you probably shouldn't use your VPN to, like, steal things.
Right.
You know what I mean? Or, like, if it costs fair market value in your area and you're trying to save, $2-3.
Right.
Probably not the best use of a VPN.
Right, but at that point...
it gets a little wonky because what can and can't you use a VPN for?
Right.
Right?
Because I still remember the days when, like, Amazon and other, online sales platforms didn't charge sales tax.
Sure.
And, then that became a thing.
And then that became a thing.
So, you have states like Texas that don't have a sales tax. So, could you... I think they do it based upon where it's going to be delivered and not on your geo tracker.
Right. I think they do it based on your delivery location.
Correct.
Because you could technically be ordering it while on a business trip.
Sure.
Like, totally not trying to trick a system.
Sure.
Or not on a VPN. You're, especially like Amazon now, realistically, you can order anything off of Amazon at any time.
Almost, yes.
You know what I mean? You're in the car driving from here to wherever, and all of a sudden you remember, oh yeah, I need to order whatever. But this TikTok ban and banning apps entirely in states.
Right.
I mean, banning betting apps, I don't think was actually a point of contention because you couldn't bet before.
Right.
So banning an app because you couldn't do the activity in that state.
Right.
Previously,
right. So, like in Idaho, there's no gambling, so therefore there's no gambling thing.
And that makes sense to me because the no gambling in Idaho predated apps existing, right? But this idea of a state could just, in theory, arbitrarily choose to ban an app. I mean, that's a precedent that's being set.
Sure. I mean, look, I don't know. I feel like there's definitely exploitative things that the internet is doing. So I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here, but bear with me.
Sure.
So this is kind of a weird one, and maybe I'm just quirky for thinking like this. But one of the things that I found when I was doing this is that, the OnlyFans model that's kind of blown up now, has drastically increased the amount of cartel and human trafficking on the site. So, in the old way of doing things, you only had 2 or 3 counties in the whole country where it was legal to shoot and produce porn, and it was highly regulated.
Sure.
So you had producers, if there was a trafficked person in, everyone who worked with them, the production houses, all of it, are getting fined heavily, if not imprisoned.
Sure. And you knew where to go because it was only in select areas, select counties.
Right.
So it was easy to police.
Correct.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
So now you have like the porn model being replaced by individuals selling their content, which to a degree has helped individual models because like before, if you were a performer, you got paid a set amount of money to be on set that day, and it was up to the production house, the people who paid everyone, to take that material and sell it to make their money back.
Right.
And sometimes they would make much more, sometimes they would make
but the model got what they got, and that was a done deal.
Right, depending on like your sales revenue and how much you typically sold as a performer, you could negotiate contracts for as high as you wanted, but it was you know what it was. Like at the end of the day, you're not making a penny more than the contract said. Like there's
there's no going back.
There's no revenue sharing.
Sure.
Now with the OnlyFans model, these girls get a percentage of what they make. Like they have their site and
it's self-managed.
It's self-managed.
It's really a small business at that point.
Right. So like I believe that the site itself takes 20%, and then you have marketing costs and whatever you want to put into your business, production costs, whatever. But you get to keep the rest. Like you get to keep it, which is a good thing. But what they've found is that because there's no oversight or managing, it's really easy to force these girls.
Okay. So basically, by making this a, let's say, worldwide
open platform,
you've now opened this up to a global policing area. Like, like instead of policing individual counties or states or what have you, you now have to police globally. And how do you do that?
And there's no production company that's now responsible for hiring these people.
Sure, so it could be anybody.
So all you need is proof of identification and a camera.
Right.
So at that point, you need to prove that the person's above 18. So like you only use human trafficking victims that are above 18.
Sure.
In a lot of cases, they have their identification. They sign them up, and then they force them to do these things that are captured and then sold.
Sure.
And like I don't know.
How do you police it? How do you regulate it? How do you... Sure. Because realistically, I mean, that's even saying that everybody is being, let's say, shady above board, right?
Right.
Because how easy would it be then to have somebody who's under 18 and you just fake their ID?
Correct.
Because realistically, I'm thinking it's going to be something similar to like the ID Me, which you just like take a picture or scan your ID.
Sure.
So if you're just taking a picture or scanning your ID and you're never actually physically handing this to anybody, I'm sure that it's much easier to forge.
Sure.
I mean, it's got to be. Yeah. So how easy would it be to just create an identity for somebody who didn't even exist before and just say, this is who they are, this is where they're from, and also they're 18.
Right.
Sure. That's, difficult.
Yeah, like from a policing standpoint,
that
sounds impossible.
Sure.
So, and like, it's not just in the United States. So like you start talking about like Eastern European practices.
Sure.
And, you can teach a girl to speak English, and all of a sudden she, like there are voice coaches where like, I'm from the Valley, I'm from wherever, and you like adopt an accent, but really they're,
from anywhere.
Right.
Anywhere, literally.
Right.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, that is an issue that far exceeds my pay grade.
Sure. Sure, but like it does make me think about that as a topic. Like, and here's the thing: I'm not even blaming like OnlyFans or any of the other fan sites for this problem because like I don't think that that's their intention or what they're seeking out to do.
Conversely, with TikTok, they are intending to steal your information.
Sure.
Like that is a blatant, like out front and out loud. Like we are here to backdoor all of your information on your phone that's there. And not only that, we're also spying on you when you post content.
Right.
Like when you post content, we now know where you took it, when you took it, we know everything about your family, your home, your this, that, and the other. Like you're not just giving them the information on your content, you're giving them the information that you have on your phone, which now is your life.
Everything.
Everything.
Right. I also am just thinking about this from the standpoint of, I don't know if you've seen this video, but like when you look at the algorithms for what gets pushed in the United States, it's like people doing stupid things, people dancing,
yes.
people shaking their ass. And then you go to like Chinese TikTok and it's like people accomplishing things, people learning things.
Oh,
people,
really?
Yes. So like just the idea of, we're going to, like, what sells in America is be stupid and be loud and proud about being stupid,
sure.
and you'll be famous. We'll make you famous. But if you actually try and, like, teach something or better yourself or whatever, we're going to suppress the crap out of that.
And it's almost weird how you can follow creators, but their information doesn't always get pushed to you.
Right.
So you can follow creators or you can
sure.
follow themes, and you might get that on your feed, but it's not a guarantee.
Right.
And so, and it's also weird, like TikTok and Reddit actually, to me, are very similar in that Reddit has a lot of sub-communities.
Sure.
Where you could basically go on Reddit and find a community for just about anything.
Sure.
And weirdly, I found that TikTok has these, sub-communities where you can put like Exmo would be like ex-Mormon TikTok.
Oh, yeah.
And it's all these Mormons who are like, yeah, I just got out of, the Mormon community and this is my experience, blah, 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 blah. And then you have like the DID community, which is like the dissociative identity disorder. And they're talking about all of their things. And TikTok has created all of these sub-communities for
sure.
all of these issues. And it's very similar to me to Reddit. But what's funny to me is, aside from all of these like sub-communities, what you see and what's even advertised, even like on commercials and whatnot, is just the dancing.
Right.
So you actually have like these high-minded conversations going on in these subgroups.
Right.
But by and large, what's being by and large what's being watched and shared is dancing and basically fail videos.
Right. Well, one of the other things that's really weird to me, talking about like social media and like laws and states, is Florida passed a bill recently in Florida that makes it illegal for the social media companies to ban ideas to not enforce free speech. So, for instance, as long as it doesn't violate the First Amendment, which most people think is all speech, there's certain speech you can't do. Like there's certain things that are being held, like you can't give away someone's identity, like where they live, or
sure.
like their full name, or like where they work. You can't out someone. You can't threaten people.
Right.
You can't, like, there's no calls to violence.
Right.
You can't. Defaming is kind of a weird one. I think a lot of times that's kind of left to like, well, let the courts, if you want to sue because somebody, defamed you, then that's on you to, seek that out. We're not going to make that decision as a platform.
Sure.
But basically, they saying that they can sue, or like for every person who gets kicked off of these platforms unrightly, it's like $10 million a day. Like, it's a ridiculous.
Oh, so for every day that they're banned.
Or when a video is taken down, it's $10 million a day until that video is reinstated.
Oh my God! So I mean, basically, what they're doing is they're making it so painful,
right,
for the platform to remove something that they don't want to do it, because basically, like at $10 million a day, you'd be bankrupt very quickly.
Well, I mean, Google's a $1 trillion a year company, so like I don't know if that's necessarily true.
Sure, but let's say that you take down 100 videos a day and have them down for 10 days.
But that's the other thing. Is what I was going to say is, if you're a creator, my VPN would be in Florida. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Because like,
you have the most rights.
You have the most rights.
Sure.
And it would put, like, we don't currently live in Florida, but I'm just saying, like.
But for the purposes of posting videos, yeah, I mean, I could see that as another use for a VPN, which is, I mean, that to me seems like a valid use for a VPN. It's like a VPN used to protect my rights, like as a user, I think is totally above board. You know what I mean? Using my VPN to skirt around pricing or whatever, probably not.
But, on the other hand, in terms of, like, my right to have free trade, is there an issue of why is somebody else getting this product cheaper? And why are you, basically charging me more, like, isn't that a form of...
Well, I mean, but that goes back to, like, people who live on border states where one state charges sales tax and the other doesn't.
Sure.
So, by and large, they will...
Go across the state.
Go across the state for big purchases. So, everyday purchases, groceries, household items, whatever, they stay in their local area. But to make major purchases like televisions and electronics and, furniture, they'll go across the state.
Well, I grew up on a border states area, like a tri-state area, and I don't remember which one of the states, so like,
Sure.
But one of them didn't have sales tax on food. So, like, all 3 states would go to that state to buy groceries. And
I've even heard, like, so in this particular situation, I was working with a family who needed to replace all of their major electronics that were stolen. And so they basically asked flat out, we don't want you to think that we are trying to hide anything because we're giving you our address in this state, but we're going to submit receipts in this other state. And when I asked them, they said, well, we have to buy and in this case it was an Apple product. Right. We have to buy an Apple product in this state. And Apple had specifically placed their store across the straight line because they knew that in this state, consumers didn't have to pay sales tax. So they built the store on that side of the state line because now they have a bigger draw of customers.
Sure.
And when this was explained to me by the person I was working with, basically on their end, they were like, we're going to do it regardless. We just don't want you to think that we are, trying to pull one over on you and reject our receipts.
Sure.
And so I was like, well, that's actually, I mean, from a company standpoint, if I'm building a store.
Right, on like a border town.
On a border town, like, absolutely, I'm going to look at, like, let me build it here because I'm going to have much more customers not want to pay sales tax.
Sure. There's also weird, like, city taxes in some places now.
There are, when taxes in general get real wonky, real fast.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's so funky, like what states want to tax and then...
Or dry counties.
Right.
Where you can't buy alcohol in a certain county, so you have to go one county over.
That's a Texas thing more than anywhere else. Because, like, I actually remember reading that, like, Texas, like, there's more county rights than any other place. That, like, the state doesn't pass many laws because they kind of leave it up to the counties, too. So, like, the counties have way more say in, like, the laws. But what you end up with is that, like, from one county to the next, the laws can be completely different. And people don't know them.
Right. Yeah, well, that is kind of wonky. Well, another thing that was wonky to me is I think I was visiting a cousin in, I want to say, South Carolina, and they had a boat. So we go to the marina, and they had to go to the bartender and ask the bartender for a glass of wine or whatever.
Right.
And I remember they asked the bartender, like, what's my, like, how much do I have left? They asked kind of a question similar to that, like, how much more is left or what have you. And I remember thinking, like, that was such a weird question. Like, generally speaking, you don't go to a bar and say, how many beers do you have in the refrigerator? Like, you don't wonder. Like, you just assume that they have a limitless supply of beer. So I asked because it was weird. And they said, oh, well, the marina is in a dry county. So we actually have to supply our own alcohol, but it has to be served by a bartender. So they would actually have to go to the county over, buy their alcohol, whether that be beer or wine or spirits or what have you, and then take it to the marina bar as their own property, but they couldn't administer it. They had to have the bartender administer it. I remember thinking that was so weird.
That's funky.
Isn't that funky?
Yeah, but I don't know, like, I feel like we're getting into such a place now of, like, state and county rights and things being so different.
Or rights in general.
Right.
Like rights in general are so wonky now, like what you can and can't do, what is and isn't regulated. Yeah,
because, like, you have, like, weird federal laws, like the Patriot Act, that basically does away with people's Fourth Amendment.
Sure.
And then you have, like, then, like, the Second Amendment is only applicable in certain cities and counties and states. Which doesn't make a lick of sense to me. And then, like, it's just like that's
or weed being a
right.
Like, it's legal on a state level, but not a national level. Like that is funky.
Technically speaking, for weed, I've heard national police, like the FBI or DEA, could still hit a dispensary where it's legal. Right.
Again, because federal law supersedes state law, which again is super funky.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that would be very unpopular and would get...
Oh my God. Like, what is it? Cancel culture would...
Right.
I mean, not let
but my point is you could totally do that. You could 100% right now, DEA, go to a dispensary in Colorado and just...
Close up shop,
put everyone in jail for the maximum sentence because you have a large amount with the intent to distribute. Yeah.
Right. And how do you deny that? Well, I wasn't intending to distribute. You have a sign outside for sale.
Right.
Like, clearance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's ridiculous. But how are they going to enforce this TikTok thing with the use of VPNs?
Right.
I
don't know. I read a thing that says that the national, because they just did a thing on this as well, with the national law that they were trying to ban TikTok, was trying to ban VPNs, was trying to get the government more access into your data, into your phone, into whatever.
Right, which that's like scary.
Backdoor.
Well, I mean, that's scary because the reason why people would say that they want TikTok is because they want their freedom and their rights, which it's the illusion, right? Because we know that China is stealing this information, they're being subversive, but by saying, I want my freedom, you're actually freely giving your, let's say, freedom to China. But the United States then is going to come in and say, oh, well, you can't have it, and also we're going to further limit your freedom. Like, they're doing it in an upfront way, whereas China's doing it in a back.
I don't think they are upfront because they're calling it the TikTok ban bill, but there's so many things
that are being, under that first sheet?
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and, like, I just remember, like, they used to do a thing with, like, Ron Paul was really famous for doing this. He says that, like, he would read every bill the night before. I don't think he ever voted yes on anything. So, like, but he would always read the bill, like, just as a matter of whatever. And he said, if I ever become president, the first thing I will do is I will make it a law that the lawmakers have to be able to pass a test on what's in the bill that they're voting on before they can vote on it, and if they can't do it...
Yeah, a competency test.
Yeah.
Like, you need to understand what you're voting for. I mean, but I've even heard that, though, for voting in general. Like, you need to pass a competency test for voting in general.
Sure.
But when you're talking about a law, a legislative document, that totally makes sense to me. Like, do you even know what what's in this bill?
Because I remember one time he was talking about, like, the night before, a bill was supposed to be voted on. It took him forever to even deliver him.
Sure.
And he says it was like 2,500 pages.
Oh, no.
And he gets it at 8 p.m. and the vote's at 10 a.m. So, like, he's like, I stayed up reading this thing.
Right.
And I show up there, dreary-eyed old man, stayed up all night reading this crap. And everybody else shows up, they got it at the same time I did.
Right.
Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
Nobody read it.
Nobody read it.
I mean, you read the first 10 pages and you're like, eh.
Like, you have the section earmarked where you got your pork bill in.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but that's for pretty much any important thing. Like, anytime that you're delivering bad news, you make sure that bad news is 6 pages deep.
Right.
Like, whatever the minimum value is for people to read, stick it in the end.